Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn, came into the world when Abraham was 86 years old, living near Hebron. According to Genesis 15, God appeared to Abraham and promised him he would have a son, and from him would come many nations. But at that time, Abraham and his wife Sarah had no children, as Sarah was unable to conceive. They wondered how this divine promise would ever come true. Welcome, friends, to another insightful journey through the Bible here on Bible Stories. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of Ishmael, Abraham's often overlooked son. His story weaves together human challenges, God's promises, and the unyielding grace of the divine. If you find inspiration in these timeless stories of faith, heritage, and redemption, you're in for a treat. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to Bible Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss another engaging episode. Now, let's explore this captivating narrative together. In Genesis 16:3, Sarah, still called Sarai, suggested to Abraham, then called Abram, that he should have a child with her Egyptian maidservant Hagar. She offered Hagar as a wife to Abram to bear a child on her behalf. As it says in Genesis 16:3, then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to her husband Abram as his wife, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan. This practice was not uncommon at the time. Jacob's wives would later do the same. Children born through this arrangement were legally considered the wife's, creating an early form of surrogacy. What may have seemed a wise solution to Sarah and Abraham ended up bringing more problems. Hagar did become pregnant by Abraham, but once she knew she was carrying his child, she began to look down on Sarah. Sarah, feeling despised, turned to Abraham for help. Genesis 16:4-5 explains, when she knew she had conceived, Hagar looked down on her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for this wrong. I gave my servant into your arms, and now she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." Abraham told Sarah to do as she wished, and Sarah mistreated Hagar, leading her to flee. Even though Ishmael was legally Sarah's son by this arrangement, it didn't stop Sarah from acting harshly toward Hagar. Eventually, God established a covenant with Abraham, requiring all males in his household to be circumcised, including Ishmael, who was 13 years old at the time, and Abraham, who was 99. The tension between Sarah and Hagar worsened when Sarah finally had her own child, Isaac. Even before Ishmael's birth, tensions had been brewing. An angel had appeared to Hagar in the wilderness, telling her to return to Abraham and naming her son Ishmael, meaning God hears. God had heard her distress. As Isaac grew, Sarah became more concerned about Ishmael. In Genesis 17:18, Abraham even asked God if Ishmael could be the son of promise, saying, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." Even after Isaac's birth, Abraham still showed love toward Ishmael, but Sarah viewed Ishmael as a threat to Isaac's inheritance. The situation reached a breaking point at Isaac's weaning celebration. Genesis 21:9 tells us that Sarah saw Ishmael mocking or playing with Isaac, which upset her deeply. Was Ishmael teasing Isaac, or was it just his very presence that Sarah found threatening? Either way, she demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Although this request went against the customs of the time, which generally protected maidservants' children, God instructed Abraham to listen to Sarah. He reassured Abraham that although Isaac would be the heir, Ishmael would also become the father of a great nation, because he too was Abraham's son. Reluctantly, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness with a small supply of water and food. As they wandered and neared death from thirst, God heard Ishmael's cries. In Genesis 21:17-18, God assured Hagar that her son would survive and become the father of a great nation. The fulfillment of this promise comes in Genesis 25:12-18, where we learn that Ishmael had 12 sons, each becoming a leader of a great people, forming a nation of their own. The story of Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn, begins with Hagar, the Egyptian servant of Sarah, who gave birth to him. Hagar, being of Egyptian descent, chose an Egyptian wife for Ishmael, and he eventually settled in the wilderness of Paran, as described in Genesis 21:21. Ishmael's descendants spread across a wide area from Havilah to Shur, which lies east of Egypt on the road to Assyria. The Bible details this in Genesis 25:18. Ishmael had 12 sons and 1 daughter, and their names are listed in Genesis 25:13-15. Nebaioth, the firstborn, followed by Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema. This number of 12 sons interestingly mirrors the 12 sons of Jacob and Nahor, as well as the 12 sons of Esau. Furthermore, Ishmael's daughter married Esau, Isaac's son, a fact mentioned in Genesis 28:9 and Genesis 36:3. Ishmael's descendants settled in the northern part of the Arabian Peninsula, with Havilah being in the north, and Shur, a desert region lying between Egypt and the Negev. Isaiah 60:7 references the descendants of Nebaioth and Kedar, noting their occupation as sheep herders. Ishmael's people, referred to as Arabs, which essentially means nomads, were known for their warrior-like nature and for living in constant tension with others, fulfilling the prophecy made by God that Ishmael would be a wild donkey of a man, whose hand would be against everyone, and everyone's hand would be against him. Genesis 16:12. Later, other groups, such as Abraham's sons by Keturah and some of Esau's descendants, including the Amalekites, also settled in the Arabian Peninsula. Although Isaac was Abraham's primary heir, Ishmael and the sons of his concubines were still blessed by Abraham. Genesis 25 shows that Ishmael, along with his brothers, received material blessings from their father. Interestingly, despite potential for conflict, the Bible doesn't report any between Ishmael and Isaac. In fact, they are both depicted burying their father Abraham together in Genesis 25:9. The names of Ishmael's sons are mentioned throughout the Bible as influential tribal leaders. His people, the Ishmaelites, were organized into 12 tribes living in nomadic camps spread across the southern desert. Ishmael lived to the age of 137, as noted in Genesis 25:17. But the Bible doesn't specify where he was buried. However, Muslim tradition places his tomb near the Kaaba in Mecca. In the New Testament, Ishmael is referenced by the Apostle Paul, who uses the story of Hagar's son as a metaphor, contrasting those who live under religious law with those who live in the freedom offered by faith in Christ. Galatians 4:21-31. The name Ishmael became relatively common over time, appearing several times in the Bible, such as in the lineage of Saul and Jonathan, as well as in the list of officials during the reign of King Jehoshaphat. The most famous Ishmael, however, apart from Abraham's son, was the son of Nethaniah, who belonged to the royal house of David. During the period of Babylonian domination, This Ishmael killed Gedaliah, the governor of Judah appointed by King Nebuchadnezzar. Jeremiah 41:1-15. To sum up Ishmael's story, there are several important aspects to highlight. Though Ishmael was not the child of the promise made to Abraham, God still cared for him and gave him a name that means God hears. Ishmael's destiny was one of greatness, and his descendants were numerous, forming 12 tribes much like Isaac's descendants. God also spoke about Ishmael's nomadic lifestyle and the tension his people would face with the descendants of the covenant. Over time, Ishmael's descendants became closely associated with the Midianites, another group descended from Abraham through Keturah. This blend of peoples contributed to the rich, complex history of the Arabian Peninsula, and today, many Arabs trace their lineage back to Abraham through Ishmael. While it is widely believed, especially among Muslims, that all Arabs are descended from Ishmael, the truth is more nuanced. It's likely that many Arabs do descend from Ishmael, but other groups, such as Keturah's descendants and Esau's children, also lived in the region. Ultimately, while Ishmael's descendants may claim a heritage connected to Abraham, the Bible teaches that they, too, can share in the blessings of Abraham by placing their faith in Christ for salvation. Ishmael's life and legacy reveal the broader scope of God's work in history. His birth symbolizes the natural process, a result of human effort, while Isaac's birth represents a divine miracle, where God showed his power by giving Sarah, who was barren and advanced in age, a child. The Apostle Paul takes this story even further in Galatians, using Hagar and Sarah as representations of two covenants. Hagar represents the old covenant of the law, while Sarah embodies the new covenant of grace through faith in God's redemptive plan. Believers in Christ, like Isaac, are born of the Spirit and live in freedom, no longer under the bondage of law. Paul highlights this in Galatians 4:29-31, emphasizing that those who are born according to the Spirit are heirs of the promise, not those born of human effort. As we wrap up this deep dive into Ishmael's story, we're reminded of the rich layers of human experience woven throughout the Bible. Our channel, Bible Stories, is dedicated to bringing these timeless narratives to life, offering insights that resonate with listeners from all walks of life. If you found Ishmael's journey inspiring or thought-provoking, we invite you to subscribe, like this video, and share it with others. By doing so, you'll help our community grow and continue spreading the wisdom found in these ancient stories. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Bible. Until next time, may the wisdom and grace of the Scriptures guide your way. Don't forget to subscribe and stay connected for more captivating stories from the Bible's pages.